Two very powerful players are ready to go at it as the Armageddon between Magnus and Hikaru. All set. Magnus with the white pieces, 10 minutes. Hikaru with 7 minutes, but needs only a draw.
Exactly, and it's those draw odds that make Armageddon spicy. So Hikaru will be looking to lock the position down, whereas Magnus is in a must-win position. And what do you expect? Well, he certainly can't open up in the same way that he did in the classical encounter.
Yeah, I think very, very unlikely we'll see the 4 knights Spanish again, maybe 4 knights Scotch. I think those 4 knights will not come out as early as they did in the classical. It feels like Magnus has a trick up his sleeve or something he is excited to play because he knew, he would have predicted that this would go to Armageddon.
Yeah, and it was just interesting also in the interview by Hikaru, how Hikaru knew that Magnus was going for the Armageddon, and we have a move.
Which is a different one from their classical. On move number 1 starts with the queen spawn opening, and it's a Slav.
It is a Slav defense. Magnus not going for anything timid, not going for anything with a drawish reputation this time. He's fighting head-on Hikaru in a very complex variation. This is a pure pawn sacrifice. He's going for a Queen's Gambit-esque variation here. He's fianchetted the bishop. Tanya, you know something along these lines, I believe?
I do like to play this line with the white pieces, so I'm excited to see what Magnus has prepared for this. Like you said, the way the classical went, it's clear that he was aiming for this. You sacrifice the pawn on a flank. The whole idea revolves around a center pawn eventually moving up, ideas of the knight jumping to the center of the board on e5. You also combine it with a move like a4 on the other side to hit that b5 pawn, and it all needs to be timed well. The move order matters. Magnus chooses the knight first. There's a threat. Knight takes pawn on the board. Watch out that bishop on g2, pinning the bishop on b7.
Yep, and there you see Magnus. He's trying to establish a clamp. He is saying, hey, I'm going to sacrifice that pawn and I'm not going to allow black to break out. And Hikaru just has to be very, very patient in these type of positions. First up, he has to deal with the immediate threat, as Tanya's indicated. Knight takes b5, going to be played. So that's why queen to c8. And now, how is white going to continue? That is a challenge. a4, we've seen. We've also can expand in the center. Also can just purely sacrifice the pawn with b3. And, oh, it's on the board. And now, big decision for Hikaru. Does he capture that pawn? Does he step up with his b pawn, attack the knight, try to get a protective pass pawn? It's decision time.
I'm going to throw this to Tanya, the expert in this opening. It's a new position to me. Magnus, a pure pawn down here, but with very active pieces as compensation, Tanya.
I love how Magnus is playing with so much speed. It saves me a lot of trouble in explaining this position. It's about the lead in development, David. It's about those dark squares on the board. You know, that c5 square, the e5 square under control, and targeting that base of the b4 pawn. Eventually, white wants to trade there. Win the c3 pawn by doubling down on it. You could bring your queen 1 step forward, attack it, and when the dust settles after all these trades, that c6 pawn ends up becoming a big target. Hikaru Nakamura, his aim is to get a successful c5 break, but it's the hardest thing to do in this position.
Very difficult to achieve, and Magnus's most natural move, I agree. Bringing the queen forward 1 square. Other moves, maybe you develop this bishop somewhere. I'm not sure exactly which direction. Magnus with a lot of choice. I will mention he maintains his 3-minute time advantage he started the game with. It was 10 versus 7 in terms of minutes. Magnus needing to win. He does try to trade black's dark squared bishop.
And that's so instructive. When a game is around the dark square weaknesses, you want to get rid of those dark squared bishops. You want to attack c3. You want your knight eventually on that c5 square. Magnus's rook on a1, beautifully placed to attack another weakness. I think he's feeling very good about his chances from this opening.
Yeah, I definitely think that Magnus has done well out of this opening. The question is for Hikaru, is he going to start initiating those trades? Is he going to be reinforcing his bishop on b4? Does he have the time? Tanya, as you mentioned, Hikaru's king is uncastled. Like, also, do you trade off that knight on e5? And it's decision time. And this is like the worst thing in the world when you are lower on time than your opponent.
Yeah, and Magnus, in the meantime, looking up at the big screen, he looked so relaxed. And he looks so calm. Hikaru backs up his bishop, defense on b4. If there is a trade, if white now trades on black terms, then the black pawns will be very hard to get rid of long term. Magnus maybe looking for some other threats to create.
I will point out that there are ideas of that white knight jumping to c4 and you're eyeing that d6 square, which is really screaming for a knight to land on with the construction of Hikaru's queen and king still at the center of the board. And I wonder if Magnus is trying to make those lines work. You're pointing out another big fork that comes in with knight c4. Actually, the more I look at the move, the more I like it.
Yeah, very likely to be played. Magnus pausing, though, investing some of that time advantage. It's very rare to see Hikaru burn this much time in Armageddon this early in a game. So I think the opening, a big success for Magnus Carlsen. We see the eval bar right up for white as well. So great start, but you need to be energetic in these types of positions.
Yeah, you definitely need to be energetic. You can't just let black castle and then break out. So what to do? The dark squares are potentially weak. But we see Magnus pausing. Is this a big moment?
It really feels like that. I think it's a critical one, and I think you've hit the nail on the head here, Yavanka, because tactics are brewing in the position. The move that we were looking at, right, the knight retreat, it comes with all kinds of ideas. You're also hinting at a potential piece sacrifice with knight takes pawn, eventually opening up that bishop diagonal. The knight can come in with some checks then, and things are going to get spicy really quickly. Did you notice? Hikaru, he was wincing. Just a couple of seconds ago, he doesn't like what he's seeing in front of him.
Yeah, Hikaru doesn't like his position. He's trying to keep a poker face. Of course, he'll lock in, he'll play quick. He's super good at defending with no time on his clock, Hikaru. So Magnus, he's pausing here and now. He's investing the time because he feels it is a critical moment. The top players, this is where they burn time because they know the next sequence is so essential. And whatever Magnus decides to do, he needs to do it soon. Time advantage down to around a minute and a half now. He needs to create threats, that is clear. He's a pawn down with white. Therefore, you need momentum on your side.
Magnus really taking his time on this one. I thought knight c4 was quite a natural move and was expecting him to play it sooner. Not sure what else he has on his radar. And there was a bit of an expression there which seemed to say that he wasn't very happy with the lines playing in his mind.
Yeah, he's frozen. Remember the Armageddon between these two just a few days back in round 2 of the tournament? First, Hikaru froze for a few minutes, then Magnus later froze for a few minutes, then Magnus later almost lost on time, and it's a piece sacrifice from Magnus Carlsen.
Wow.
It's a brilliancy.
It's a brilliancy. Computer loves this move, double exclamation mark. If the knight is captured, then the idea Tanya mentioned, the knight will drop back to c4 and jump into d6. Unstoppable. That knight will land a fork, a check. Magnus, crazy move there.
He spent 2 minutes, 40 seconds because he was about to sacrifice a piece and calculating it all the way through. We were looking at it with a different move order, same idea, apparently perfectly executed. Hikaru doesn't dare capture that knight, brings his king to safety. But now with the material balance, it's all about the piece activity. That knight on e5, which he's trading the bishop off first, pawn takes bishop.
Yep, and all he's going to be doing now is just taking control of those dark squares. The knight has to move, so it can move to a4 in order to control c5. I mean, black is struggling here. He's got a backward c-pawn. That's not going to be living long in this world. And Magnus is spoilt for choice. Complete control over the position.
Hopefully we'll break down that piece sacrifice a bit more later once we have a bit more time. But it was all about this diagonal that we're just highlighting on the board. The black king, if it had been stuck in the middle, cut off on that diagonal, would never have been allowed to castle, never been able to get to safety. So we see a much quieter position now. But important that Hikaru trusted Magnus. He trusted him. Maybe he'd calculated it in Magnus's time. Hikaru's playing quick, playing practical. Magnus's time advantage nearly gone now.
I was just wondering, brilliant move. We saw the brilliancy mark appear, but did Magnus just spend too much time getting that on the board? It's still material, is level, it's balanced. Magnus with a strategic advantage here. That domination that you're talking about on the dark squares coming up. But Hikaru's knight also controlling the c5, b6 points here. It's not that easy, David, and I think anything can happen when you're playing with less than 5 minutes and no increment.
Yeah, anything can happen, but white definitely has the advantage. The white queen's coming for a weak pawn. That black pawn indefensible, the white rook sliding over. If Hikaru can't achieve c5 now without losing a pawn, which I don't think he can, we'll see a bishop trade and that pawn just drop off, then he might just be in big trouble.
Yeah, but he might just have to make that sacrifice just to get some kind of activity, because at the minute, he is just struggling when it comes to space. And there we see Hikaru just rerouting the bishop to b5. But Magnus, he's laser sharp focused on that pawn on c6.
And I'm going to remind everyone of the last Armageddon. Magnus was winning, then Hikaru was winning, then Magnus was winning, and finally in that time scramble, Hikaru was the one who came on top. Again, it's going to be a firefight as the players go down on the clock. Magnus with a 1-minute lead. Hikaru wanting to double up on the A file, putting some pressure on that knight on A4, queen to A8. Could be an idea for black here.
Definitely, that seems to be his idea. First, Magnus pushes a pawn. Note how that black bishop was actually hitting the pawn on its starting square. Now, Magnus has a clear threat to win the b4 pawn. Unstoppable. I think Magnus Carlsen will be a pawn up in a very, very promising position. Hikaru's also down a minute and a half. He needs to go into hustle mode. He needs something. There we go. Tanya predicts it right. He pins the white knight, first of all, but down a pawn.
He's going to pin it further with his own knight coming forward. But do you have time to capture? Because there are some ideas on the bank rank. Yes, the queen comes under attack, but what happens in the end of that tactical skirmish?
Oh, great spot there, Tanya. Knight takes knight. Black is actually sacrificing his queen with this move. Let's just quickly put it on the board while Magnus thinks. Knight takes knight, rook takes rook. Black here, after giving up the queen in the corner, will land a deadly check to the white king. You drop your bishop back at the end, a capture, and we count. Black has 2 rooks and a bishop for the queen. Black would be winning, so Magnus cannot take this knight. It would be a terminal blunder.
No, he cannot capture that knight, but he can make an improving move because the c6 pawn, that's not running away, and that is the ultimate in weaknesses.
Yeah, we could see a scenario where Hikaru wins back a pawn by capturing, kind of trading the knights, winning on a4. Eventually, he drops the c6 pawn. It might be 5 pawns versus 4 pawns, rook endgames. It might be a long, long endgame grind. First, Hikaru goes the other way. He blocks the white bishop with his knight on the diagonal, hitting the white queen in the process. Still very tense. Magnus, this isn't going to be easy to convert for him.
Not at all. And Hikaru also wants to get his rook into the party, right? You want it on the b file, targeting the b3 pawn, so opening up the way. Magnus does give up his bishop, so a big decision. He wants to play knight against bishop. But I do believe the minor pieces will come off the board very soon. With the pin that we see, comes back with the rook.
Yeah, so Magnus is just simply saying, hey, I'm prepared to give up the b pawn. You can win that one, but I'm just going to be focused on c6. But I was awarded a question mark. I actually thought that Magnus would be doubling on the c line and just primarily focusing on c6. Oh, h5. That is chaos mode initiated. He plans to go h4. Well, it was stopped by Magnus immediately.
Yeah, great move, though, Hikaru. He's switching focus. Now, if he can somehow bring the black queen in to this diagonal, potentially, if he can bring his bishop into this diagonal, suddenly the light squared weaknesses around the white king might start to tell. But for now, Magnus still has everything covered. Hikaru improves his rook. Great stability from Hikaru. He always does this. Even when he's in trouble, he finds a way to consolidate, and later, only later, it comes into another phase of the game. Then he'll start to try and counterattack.
And Magnus's pieces are completely tied down, right? Queen is really the only one that can move. If you move the rook, the knight would have been hanging. The knight couldn't move because the pin along the A line. So Magnus left with queen moves. He does come back. Will Hikaru find a way to improve his queen? He does it on the light squares. The game will be Hikaru's back. I think you ignore the evaluation bar in such a situation.
Well, wait 1 second, because
Whoa!
Look at this.
G5 on the board.
I know, and it's the light squares around the white king that is going to be very vulnerable, and Hikaru is really mixing things up. Now h4.
Look at Magnus. He's feeling the pressure. The last 2 moves that Hikaru's played have been absolutely crazy. They've completely turned the dynamics of the game.
Brilliant from Hikaru. He's 2 pawns down, but he's fighting hard. The black queen ready to swoop. Magnus has to give 1 pawn back just to open up the 3rd rank for his queen. He slides his rook now. The black queen comes in. Hikaru knocking pieces down. This is the chaos phase of the game. This is exactly what we saw on day 2 of the tournament, where it was Magnus who cracked his nerves. Hikaru now piling on so much pressure against the white king.
Yeah, Magnus has lost control in this position. He might be material up, but it's pandemonium on the king side. And now, the king has moved. The rook is preparing to slide over to h8 and infiltrate.
This is incredible play by Hikaru. The control and the consistency of good moves that he's shown. This is Hikaru Nakamura at his best.
Yeah, Magnus landed the opening surprise. He was dominant in the position, couldn't find a knockout blow, and now it's Hikaru's turn to strike. And the eval bar is bang in the middle, despite the fact black is a whole pawn down. that shows how strong Black's attack is. The White Knight is actually a bit offside. The Black Bishop has great potential as well. Anyone's game now.
Yeah, completely. And do remember that Magnus is in a must-win scenario. He cannot allow Hikaru any form of perpetual check whatsoever. The rook slides over, and we see a capture on e4.
Whoa, that's a brave, gutsy decision, allowing Hikaru to come in with the checks, but it looks like Hikaru's miscalculated it. Magnus's king will survive. He is the champion of King of the Hill. He's ready to go all out there, all again after Queen h3.
Yeah, the White King's just going to move forward. It can move forward across the board. The White King might actually run away. We might see this happen. And White, after all, is defending with several pieces. Hikaru makes a mistake.
Oh, maybe he needed just to capture the pawn on g5. But it is tempting to give a few checks when you only have a minute left. And
Setting up bishop g2, watch out.
I know.
Big threat. You've got to check on e5.
But it's White to play.
Yes.
Check on e5. Have to do that. And maybe the knight can actually start coming back. But wow.
Why is this so winning for White? Is Magnus going to be the first to Hikaru's king with the queen and the knight?
Yeah, Magnus is getting there first. This is just a one-move threat. Black actually doesn't have too much coordination. Magnus was reaching for his queen there. He can give a check, put everything on dark squares. Oh, he puts his king forward. King March again. Magnus did this yesterday against Gukesh and was punished, but it's working. He's running away on the dark squares. No good checks for Hikaru Nakamura.
That is nerves of steel, with the queen, bishop and rook all combining for an attack against the White King and coolly marching up to that f4 square. Things only Magnus Carlsen can do.
Yeah, but the clock is ticking down. 40 seconds for Hikaru. Anything can still happen. Hikaru just has to generate some threats somewhere along the lines, and let time trouble take care of the rest.
It does hang the bishop, this last move.
Careful, there's a big threat. Black wants to give a check with his rook, and he would have been skewering the White King and Queen because the White G-pawn pinned. Now Magnus getting his Queen and King out of the same line. The question is, can he take the bishop? He does. He's a whole knight up now and a couple of pawns, Magnus Carlsen. Hikaru, he needs to land a blow here or he's just busted.
Yeah. One move away from winning, right? Knight e4 or knight d7, and landing a check on f6 would be game over. It's insane. Hikaru, with his attack, has chased Magnus's king to the center of the board, but there's no killer blow. And Magnus, he just simply slides his rook on the other side. Full board awareness here by the world #1, coming in with a check on e8.
And Hikaru, he is searching for a solution, but he's got no time on the clock.
2 seconds, 1 second.
He's gonna get flagged, and he does!
Hikaru Nakamura loses on time. The position was lost anyway. But Magnus, he had done the hard work. He defended well. And the two great champions now in front of us discussing that crazy Armageddon game.
That was wild. I mean, sure made up for their classical encounter. This one was just absolutely crazy. It started off in a really